Hi, I'm Chad. Today we're having a free-form discussion. My guest doesn't know what I'm going to ask him, and I don't know what he is going to ask me. Our goal is to make this a discussion that is valuable for product managers, leaders, and innovators. And if you're listening to this, then we must have judged that we actually said something helpful to you to listen to. Otherwise, this isn't going to get published. So we'll see how this actually ends up. With me is a former colleague, that's Matt Coatney. And we were together on an important product at LexisNexis for a point in time. I went on to teach graduate courses in innovation and coach product managers and leaders in organizations. And Matt got more involved in information technology, leading professional services and consulting operations for a few organizations, as well as serving as CIO for one of the largest law firms in America. Interestingly, his career started in AI out of school in AI systems, and that was 25 years ago. And today he still is learning about AI and applying AI to work, and is also a product executive helping out startups and some other ventures as well. You'll probably hear a bit more details on that. If you're listening to us and would rather see what we look like for whatever reason, you can go to our YouTube channel, simply search for Product Mastery Now on YouTube. We'll jump in right after this.
How can you unlock your full potential as a product manager? We're sharing the product management insights you need. They are based on the 7 research-backed knowledge areas for product mastery. You'll learn to create products customers love, enhance your influence, and elevate your career. Welcome to Product Mastery Now, hosted by Dr. Chad McAllister, product management professor, practitioner, and your guide.
Matt, thanks for hanging out and talking.
Yeah, Chad, it's great to see you again. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a bit. So, listeners, the way this came about was you reached out because you had someone that could be a good product manager for a company. And so I was helping you think about that and said, hey, we haven't talked for a long time. We should catch up. And one thing led to another. I said, well, why don't we just record it and see where we end up? There's a lot of good conversations like that. I'm like, man, I really wish we would have recorded this before. Yeah. So I have categories of things I have thought about talking about, and you probably have categories of things too. I'm going to let you kick it off, and we'll see where we end up.
All right.
So,
yeah, I mean, mine is sort of a curiosity question first, which is obviously AI is all the craze right now, particularly in terms of generative AI and large language models and all of that. And I'm just curious, sort of, what are you seeing? Maybe with a couple of lenses. One is from a product manager perspective, and then another would be more on the entrepreneur and founder perspective, and then maybe even education and sort of in the teaching aspect of things. So I'm just sort of curious what your vibe is and sort of what are you seeing that's real and helpful, and where is the hype getting in the way of that?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I'll try to give the broad brush in some of those areas a little bit. It was interesting. Last year, I was at a conference, the PDMA conference, Product Management and Product Development and Management Association conference, and I was interviewing people and did not make it to too many sessions, but 3 sessions had some kind of AI tool for customer research, right? And it was certainly becoming a thing and being talked about a lot. And then more recently this year, and I should mention, one of the sessions I did sit on was a really good workshop by a guy named Mike Kizzy. There's a podcast discussion about this earlier. I should know what episode off the top of my head, but I don't have them all memorized. It might have been like 504. He's going to kill me if that's not it. But you can search for Mike Kizzy and find it. And he led a really good workshop, which was essentially a design sprint that if we had done it the normal way, it would have been about 3 to 5 days of work. We did it in 3 hours. And there was a little less talking to real customers than I would normally have liked. But we had our team of humans, and so there were 4 of us humans. And then we had our AI companion that was helping us out. And our AI companion on the team was being driven by someone who was good at prompt writing and knew the product space and the kinds of prompts that we would be used to want to write. So essentially it was the 5 of us, but I consider the AI a teammate on this. Yeah. And it really just accelerated the work, right? The 4 of us humans would think about, let's brainstorm, because it's a workshop, let's brainstorm what problem that we want to solve for a customer. And we kicked that around for a few minutes and then asked the AI for some information, more details on that customer. What have we not thought about yet? Asked about problems that they might be interested in solving that we haven't thought about, unmet needs and all that. it was a really interesting experience because in 3 hours we ended up with a pretty decent marketing description for solving a customer's problem and a pretty decent prototype of what the thing could look like. So that wasn't bad. And then most recently, fast forward a couple other examples, in the product space, there's a company I really respect, Applied Marketing Science, AMS, and they really are the thought leaders in this area, voice of the customer research. The original formulation of what voice of the customer research was done by their founder. He's an MIT professor and founded this company. They've been doing this for decades now, and they have added AI to their tool set. And it's a customized model for voice of the customer research. And they're finding some actually nuanced, unmet needs that they don't necessarily find in their normal interviews. And they're pretty exhaustive, right? Getting 100, 150 needs out of a job a customer has to accomplish, and finding a lot more through the AI tools and getting a better understanding about some connections. So that's been pretty interesting. Personally, on the personal front, I really am enjoying, I use Claude primarily. The way it interacts with me more than ChatGPT, but I have used both a lot. I treat it as my brainstorming partner. And I've gone from trying to figure out how to put everything into one long prompt that I want it to do, which doesn't give me good results and isn't as enjoyable, frankly, to actually being like, hey, Matt, I need to kick some things around with you, right? But I can't get Matt on the phone. So I go to Claude and say, hey, Claude, I need to think about this. Can you help me with that? Sure, I can help you with that. And then I give it some more information. And we just go back and forth. And more than anything, I find that is helping me to get past inertia, right? I have the problem that a lot of people have, which if you're staring at the blank piece of paper, you have to write something or get something done. It's just the inertia of getting started. And have grown quite fond lately of saying, oh, well, let's just kick it around a little bit with Claude. And that gets me started, right?
Yeah, I think that brainstorming use case is really underappreciated. A lot of people are focused on it just helps me do productivity things better, right? Write quicker, respond to emails, more the generative side of things. But definitely talking to other entrepreneurs and people that have been using these tools for a while, the brainstorming, that idea of kicking things around, it's great for creative and for entrepreneurial types. It's actually really good for, I think, deep thinking experts. So think scientists, lawyers, and others, because they don't have often as much opportunity to bounce ideas around other people anymore like they may have 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so, yeah, I'm seeing
I think part of that is the water cooler culture that's been lost, right?
That's right.
More of us are remote working, and this will ebb and flow for sure, but it's quick to grab Claude because Claude's always there.
Yes, it definitely augments the human connection. But yes, yeah, you still need that too. The other thing that I've found, you mentioned about prototyping, that's honestly, for me, that's what's blown me away, is things like GitHub Copilot for helping developers, particularly developers like me that aren't really developers anymore, but know enough to hack my way around. But also then there's the next level. There's a product called, I think it's a V0, that will build a full-fledged, not a wireframe, but an actual working web app based on human prompts. And so it's quite clever, and that's early days. So I think we'll start to see that sort of prototyping, getting something proof of value up and running quickly to bounce ideas off people. That's, it's coming along really quickly.
Yeah, that whole no code area is pretty amazing how quickly it's changed.
Yes. And I was at a company doing it was no code analytics software just 10 years ago. And it was just a chasm too far. We may have talked about this when we chatted last. It's a chasm too far where you had to know enough about data and analysis to be able to, you had to have the logic behind it. So you couldn't be an end user necessarily and just say, I want to build this app. That was the aspiration, but you just ended up, it was too hard, and you turned around and basically paid a services company to do that work for you. I think we're starting to get, that chasm's getting smaller and smaller as the tech gets better and the AI capabilities get better. Yeah,
it's a good change. I think if we talk about the entrepreneur that thinks they have a good idea and they're trying to solve someone's problem and they need software, the Where things get hung up typically is turning it over to a software developer too soon before they've actually thought through the workflow and maybe what they think they envision what the user interface experience should be like. And taking the time to do those detailed prototypes is really helpful because you get clarity in your head. You get it down on paper and you explain it to someone else. You go, oh, okay, see why this doesn't make sense to you. Let me rework it, right? Because we're just too close to it all the time, right? Yeah. And having tools that can help us do that part faster and then maybe even bridge it into actual code, wow, that'd be amazing. But even just getting clarity around that user experience sooner and finding out where we've made assumptions in our brains that aren't on the paper, right, that will mess up users. That can save a lot of time and save a lot of dollars.
Absolutely.
Having to fix things.
Yeah, I'm starting to see too, there are products, you mentioned products that already exist where they're embedding these models into them, which is a natural extension and fairly straightforward to do. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there. But then there's other sort of AI native products, like one's Product Forge, if memory serves, but it's using large language models to help generate user stories and do them in a very interactive kind of way. But then it layers in a lot of organization and management sort of flow around that. So that's just one of many that's out there, I know.
One I just saw a webinar on recently. So in the product management space, some companies will use ProdPad as their platform to manage product management work, product management projects. And it does a number of things for you kind of from start to finish, to understand the customer, keep track of what the big objectives were originally, what's the overall strategy we're trying to align to, keep everyone moving towards the same direction, understand those user stories and what's actually getting done. So kind of a project management approach specifically for products. And it's one of the most popular ones out there. And I'm sure everyone's in the race to add AI tools into their things. But I do like this notion that they've just released. It's at the moment called Copilot, and they're not the only ones using the term. And it's very confusing to me because there's the really big Microsoft company using the term, and it's not I had to look this up because I was curious. It's not a trademarkable term that's been determined. So people are using it, but it confuses me now because it's like, well, does that mean you're using Microsoft's thing? But nonetheless, so I like this idea of platforms that are making it simpler to just help you with the work, right? And maybe find some holes about things. Are we aligning to the original strategy well? Are there some unmet needs here based on what you know? And it's one repository that has all the information in it. So even outside stakeholders beyond the immediate product team can go ask questions too and get some answers. And that's one thing I want to talk to you about because I suspect that's the direction things will head in. Because I know, and I frankly have tried this a little bit. I could go use the expensive tool that is built for a specific purpose. Like I've played around with one recently for a marketing purpose to clarify some communications for my own business, right? It's like, okay, I know that this approach they're using, I really like this approach. I'm going to go play with the tool and see how good of a job it does. Versus I know I can go to ChatGPT, knowing the approach, I can write my own prompts and probably get to a place that's okay. But it's going to take me a lot longer to figure that out because I imagine all they've done is they've done that work to figure out the prompts and they're leveraging ChatGPT. So I'm curious what you're seeing in this space in terms of, do we think we're going to see more of these specialized frameworks that they've just kind of done the prompt engineering for us and so we don't have to think about it? And are we going to see large language models tailored better for that specific thing? So perhaps they give us better results in having, my understanding right now, if I go to ChatGPT, it's going to search through the entire large language model for all the time I ask anything, whether it's I need help with software or I need help with marketing, right?
Right. Yeah. No, I think all organizations are grappling with that right now. And as a bit of context, so I co-lead our AI initiative at the firm that I'm at now, me and the innovation officer. And we're approaching it a couple different ways. So to your point about sort of general versus specific use cases, where we're trying to go is for the general population, pick one solid general purpose large language model that's the generalist that can float across most use cases. We are using a legal specific product because our lawyers are the revenue generators of the firm. So we try to tailor an application that makes sense for them. And there are a few out there. Then we've been looking at very specific tactical use cases for sort of niche practices or types of documents and things like that. And what we are finding is it's a pretty high bar to justify spending another 5 to 6 figures on a specialized product when, to your point, the general product can get you 90% of the way there. Like, is that extra 10% worth 6 figures? And if you do that 3 or 4 or 5 times, all of a sudden you've got $1 million investment. So I think for most organizations, just setting that bar high enough that the ROI makes sense. What I do think, though, is to your point, is it's less about the actual models in my mind. It's more about what data are you training them on? And just as, if not more importantly, how are you integrating that into your workflow? Because if you're spending, let's take invoice processing. If you're paying someone to sit in front of a terminal to take an invoice, upload it into ChatGPT, get the data out, pump it back, you're spending a lot of time where a workflow could be automated around that and streamline the whole process. So I think that's where there's a lot of untapped value.
Yeah. I think that's a good example of when I mentioned ProdPad. That just simplifies things so much, and it keeps the information in one place where everything else is. I really expect things like that to take off that are built into the workflow you're already used to and just augmenting it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I do, to your point about these models are just becoming so robust, and I was having a debate earlier today around, are we close to, at the cusp of, over the edge of artificial general intelligence, AGI? And it's a squishy concept, but certainly if you think about the general applicability of these tools, it's hard to find a use case that they're not able to tackle when it comes to just at least English language, right? So I do think it's going to be a high bar for companies to try to introduce something that's better than certainly the next generation that comes out and so forth.
Until they start thinking for us.
That's a scarier concept. That's right.
That's another thing, yes. And I know you're an optimist in this space, right? That AI is going to help humanity, and not, as I grew up on science fiction and Terminator movies and the like.
Matrix, yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Same.
Another perspective.
Yes. Yes. There are definitely risks. There are definitely things that don't run with scissors with this. We have, as you can imagine, at a law firm, relatively risk-conscious organization. So we do have policies in place. We don't outright prohibit many things. We do some things that are clearly risks, nation states, things of that nature. But generally, we try to provide guardrails and education on when it's appropriate to use, how to use it, not to upload client confidential data into ChatGPT, for instance, things like that. So I think that there are, practically for enterprises, there's ways to sort of provide those guardrails. But existentially, there's, and that was one question that I had for you. Like, there is I think, a real fear among professionals that are largely an apprenticeship type model. And I would put not just lawyers in that, but I'd put software developers in that same camp. If your senior people are using these tools in lieu of a junior person, how do the junior people become senior people, right? So it's, and I do wonder, do you think that is a risk within product management as well? How much sort of tutelage goes on product teams?
So I'll lean into this a little bit from, seeing students' performance on university work right now. One, unfortunately, that's a little disappointing at this point in the game, because certainly there are students who are using AI tools in a way that we would not like to see them use them as university teachers, to have them do the work for them, as opposed to perhaps help them with some concepts or help them figure out an outline for a paper or sort of things. There was a student's paper I was reading not too long ago, and I'm going, and you kind of pick up on it pretty easy, right? As you read through, because we kind of get used to the way AI writes, and sometimes it's a bit flowery. The language is a little over the top a little bit. And my daughter, who's in grad school, told me she saw a report lately that the use of a certain phrase, that they pop up in AI things in today's world, right? There's little phrases that come out, has increased like 20% in journal publications in the last year, right? But I'm reading through the paper and going, okay, I don't think this is you. And at the very end, it says, if you would like for me to explore any other topics for you, please ask me. Like, you could at least take out the obvious things, right? So more specifically to the point, I think we're going to probably go through this little uneasy period for a bit where employees who aren't getting good mentoring from more experienced people are trying to make their way and using AI tools to help them, just as I encourage that. These are tools to help us expand our thinking, save some steps, and like in my case, be a really good brainstorming partner for me, right? So that's a good use of it. But I think it's going to take a bit for people to figure out how to rely on them wisely and when they shouldn't. In the product space, we have seen some failures where we're basically asking the AI chatbot to give us a persona for a customer and their unmet needs and running with that. That should never take the place of actually having conversations with people, with the actual customer. Get out of your office and go interact. And so for the younger employee, put in those terms, I think they probably have the advantage of maybe being more comfortable with the AI tools. Most of them are digital natives that are entering the workforce, and they grew up not knowing anything but computers in their lives and are more comfortable with using those tools. And where some of us who have a little less experience are figuring that out. But also take advantage of any opportunity you can for mentorship to get a wider perspective. Because those of us with just more experience, we can look at the AI output and really appreciate how it's helping, and also think about, well, here's something else we need to ask, or here's something we need to verify. This is still an assumption we need actual data on to make a decision.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. It's something I hadn't appreciated until just now, is one of the ways that these tools can benefit the younger person, is it removes some of the low-hanging fruit that they would have gone to a mentor for, like, hey, can you read this? And there were obvious mistakes in it, or like a simple coding mistake that they missed. And yes, that's a teaching moment that they could have gotten from the mentor. But if they can get that from an AI tool, it frees up the bandwidth to actually get to some of the meatier, like core skill kind of things that you really need a mentor for, like those life lessons, not this should have been this word or this should have been this code. So I think there is an opportunity there, but you're right. It at the end of the day, the person has to avail themselves of the mentor, seek them out, be proactive, and so forth. So yeah, no, that's helpful.
Yep. What are you seeing in your space? So in a law firm, the lawyers are the knowledge producers.
Yes.
And so their skill is valued for sure. How are you seeing AI? Let me ask this in a two-part question. When the firm, or you can put it in another organization that you've worked with, but when AI started becoming on the horizon, what was like their key question that leaders, the partners in the law firm were asking? And then the second part then is, how have the lawyers responded to this change as well?
Yeah. Yeah. It's been an interesting ride over the last 2 years or so. It's been a roller coaster. So I think it started where most leaders in law firms, and probably other industries as well, there was the initial shock and fear, I would say, real fear about this is going to obliterate the profession, right? Some went to that hyperbolic level. Not everybody did, but I think they viewed it as a real threat for a couple of reasons. One is the tools are not inexpensive, particularly for trying to get something specific to law firms. So there's a barrier to entry. And then you're producing higher quality work in theory quicker, which means you're billing less if you're on a billable hour on an hourly billing model. And so it was a double whammy of you're going to add cost to the organization and then you're going to reduce revenue. And so there was a real practical, I think, fear that may manifest itself. I will say over time and with education and exposure, like that has definitely developed into more of a nuanced view. Many, our firm as well, are bullish on its capabilities with some practical limits to that. But I think that it is, I'll finish this thought and then I'll sort of talk about the individual lawyers. But I think from a management perspective, it's definitely viewed Some firms view it as a competitive differentiator. Some view it as we have to do this because everybody else is doing it. And it's basically, if we don't do it, we'll get left behind. So there's definitely a lot of interest, momentum, investment. Not always a great appreciation of how. It's just hit the AI button. Just go do this. Can't we point AI at that? I'm like, that's not really how it works. But it's definitely, I've seen leaders here and elsewhere mature and grow in the journey, which you would hope and expect. For the individual lawyers, it's a mixed bag. And it's like any other new technology, there's the adoption curve. And
Right.
what I have found is we have, like anywhere else, we have early adopters, we've got the early majority, and then majority and laggards. We're definitely starting to get into the early majority, and we're growing adoption. This has an interesting trend where you'll see some people get a new tool like this. They'll try it a couple times. They don't quite get it and they just abandon it. That's natural too. But what I have found is the people that get the tool, their usage increases over time. And it hasn't reached a plateau from what I have seen. So you're really seeing people start to integrate it into their workflow on a daily basis, like probably you and I are. And it's neat to see because it can be a great boon for them. Specifically for lawyers, what we've found are some obvious use cases are summarizing content, right? Summarizing a contract, an agreement, a brief, proceeding, legal proceeding, etc. A new statute that comes down from the courts, from Congress and such. So a lot of summarization, synthesis, drafting, strategy. So sort of bouncing ideas off how can I adjust this provision to be more favorable to my client? Brainstorming ideas for taking into court, like how you would compete against this case. So there's things like that. So it's definitely, you and I were in this space
Right.
15 years ago, and it still blows my mind that with the technology we were building then, it was fragile. It was very expensive to build. It was mostly sort of rules and heuristics driven. It broke easily. It was fragile. It got things wrong, and it wasn't really applicable sort of if you pointed it in an adjacent space. All those things are no longer true. It understands the nuance of the language, the quirkiness of the way lawyers write. It's able to apply to new case law that hasn't come out yet. So it's just, it's phenomenal. The one thing that's probably surprised me more than anything else about this is just how increasing the model size over and over and over again and pumping more and more data in, like the emergent properties that have come out of that and the capabilities that come out of that, they're really impressive. And yes, in theory, we sort of knew that was possible, but to see it in action is really just mind-blowing, having been in the space for 25 years now. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. I think the area in there I'm probably most concerned about is the hallucinations, which seems to have gotten much better, but talk about some specific examples. I was going through a very detailed lease agreement not too long ago, and I thought, I don't have time to read all this. So gave it to the chatbot, and I asked it to identify areas that are not favorable to me as a leasee, right? And it did a great job, and it went through and found all the things that I assume found all of them. I did try to scan through everything and told me what they were. And then I went back and asked, okay, where are these in the actual contract? And it gave me all that. Very helpful, right? Was very happy with that. And I was wondering, was it going to pull in anything that wasn't there? And it did not. So I thought that was A plus. We have been experimenting in the last year with using it for this podcast. And so we write up an article version, and we used to write that from scratch. And now we're taking the transcript and asking it to generate an article in a certain format. And that's always, it is a collaboration with the AI chatbot to get it to working on things. But so far, we've also frequently find examples where it is, in a sense, hallucinating. It will pull in other information that is not in the transcript, right? I mentioned something about design thinking and go into a little bit of detail. It will add to that, and maybe it thinks it's being helpful. I don't know if it thinks that. And I think, especially in a law firm, because as we both know from the industry, this is a very risk-averse industry. And so I pay attention to when very risk-averse industries start adopting something new, because they're not going to do it if they don't see clear value and able to manage the risk.
Yeah.
And that's the part where I'm a little suspicious, like, well, if it's analyzing the case and it adds something else in, that's worse than leaving something out, right?
Right, right. Well, maybe. I think they're both bad, and you're right. So the hallucinations have gotten better, but by no means is that a solved problem. We absolutely, and we beat this over the heads of our lawyers as well, is you must go back. This is a tool, an assistant. It is not the end all be all. You need to review it. You need to analyze it. Treat it as though it was an associate giving you that work.
Right.
Because you know there are probably going to be mistakes, as we all make mistakes, right? So I think that's part of it. But you're absolutely right that we do get trained. It's getting better and better where it's so good that we get trained to think, oh, I really don't have to look at it that deeply because it's pretty good. And you could miss something. The error of omissions, actually, I think those are the incorrect information. That's somewhat easier to spot because it sticks out like a sore thumb. But the omission piece, if it's omitting an important piece that's relevant, that could be just as bad or worse because you're not looking for it, right? Because it's not in there. So that's the one I really try to harp on and encourage to look for, is like, be mindful of this may not be comprehensive. But yeah, it's at the end of the day, we joke, it is like an assistant, is like a younger associate.
It's your first year associate.
It's your first year associate that doesn't sleep. That's always there, to your point.
That's
Yeah.
the thing.
Well,
a lot of associates never sleep too, but
Also true.
This one's truly always there.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So, yeah, those in the legal space, being associate is a very tough role to play for a couple of years. Back to workspace, I think this is where organizations are going to win that are creating AI tools. I said workspace, I meant workflow. That are creating AI tools that recognize workflow. Because that was the magical thing that happened on the product that you and I were part of at LexisNexis, was it seamlessly, transparently integrated into what the user was already doing and gave them a new valuable capability without them having to do anything different, right? Which is why I think ProdPad is, and I'm not sponsoring them in any way, right? There's a few platforms, that's just the most recent one I know of about. If they get that right, that they make the workflow transparent, like here's the tool, that's great. Right now, Microsoft has been pushing Copilot in all of their Office applications. Every time I open up Word, I'm confronted with a dialogue that doesn't let me say, don't tell me again for a while. It's just always there for me to close. And I don't find it integrated into my work, right? It's an extra step I have to think about. Well, how am I going to use Copilot writing this thing I have to write? And I don't think of it that in those terms at all. So I think who gets the workflow figured out are going to be the organizations that win with applying AI and some existing capabilities.
I think so. And I think we, as both consumers and employees and corporations, will benefit from that race, because for the average business, average small business, you're not going to go build your own model. You're not going to invest six figures in a really impressive customized product, et cetera. But as these companies race to integrate it into their tools, if you think Slack, Asana, Trello, Salesforce, pick your enterprise software.
Right.
I think that you're right, that as they integrate those and integrate them smartly, we all get the benefit from it. I do think, though, and this is where I think product managers could be as we've talked about before, they're consultative, you're change agents, like you're more than what maybe some people typecast you. And I think there's a real opportunity here to make that point known within the larger organizations of just how this isn't a bolt-on. This isn't just to put a little button there that goes and does a chat GPT. Like, this can be integrated into the product and really add. The reality is, a lot of, I think, larger corporations are still struggling with it's the inertia of being a large business. And so these startups that can figure it out and get it into products quickly and out the door quickly, they have a chance to disrupt. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, there's been many a senior executive sitting around a table who brings forward, like, well, we just need to add AI to what we're doing. And we don't
hear
know
it
what
3 to 4 times a week.
it's right. We don't know what that actually means.
Yeah.
right? It's how, and as product people, how do we turn that into a customer-oriented question instead, right? How can we enhance the value of our product to solve a problem the customer actually cares about by using AI? Is it going to solve it faster? Is it going to solve it better? What is it going to do? We have to ask customer-focused questions instead.
Yeah. I'll leave on that topic, I'll leave with one other thought, which is one of the things I've been most impressed with my own incorporation of these tools into both my own workflows and products that I've been building is its ability to make structure out of unstructured data.
Oh, yeah.
And as a consumer, the number of times I go onto a form and retype the same things, or I upload a document to then turn around and type in the information of the same document. There is so much capability now that's truly plug and play. Like it takes 30 minutes to get the prompt right and the call out to an API and you're moving. That I think there's a lot of low hanging fruit there for products. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was experimenting the other day. There was a figure in a book that I wanted to represent in a slide for a class, but I wanted to change it a little bit, and so I wanted to have a vector graphic of the figure instead. And so I took a snapshot of the figure, loaded it into AI chatbot, and said, "Can you make a vector graphic of this?" Boom, done, right? It was so very nice to now have it, and I could edit that in my Inkscape program, which is open source stuff. So, like
on that same note, I'll share two of the things that have blown my family away because they're not using this kind of stuff the way that we do. And one is in the Scientific American. I like to read scientific because I'm a nerd. They have these little puzzles in like a section of the page, and they're pretty challenging. And I'll try them. I usually don't get them right, but I just pull up ChatGPT on my phone, take a picture. I don't even ask it anymore. I just take a picture and hit send, and it solves them. Almost every time. But then the other time, my daughter was studying. She's 5th grade, and they were doing like I think idioms, right? Like the bird in the hand is worth two in the bush kind of thing, like those kind of sayings. And there was a picture, and my wife and I were both stumped. We had no idea what it was. So we took a picture of it and asked ChatGPT, and it was quite morbidly killing 2 birds with 1 stone. But it figured that out and explained it to us. And I was like, okay, this is pretty clever.
Pretty good, right? Yeah. The amount of information that they know is pretty good. So very cool. Before we get to a quote here, any closing topics that you wanted to bring up?
Oh, so many. We'll have to do a part 2 sometime. No, I think, there's so much more out there than obviously AI, but it's the topic du jour and something that I'm personally passionate about. I think one thing that I've started really delving into is more just how this kind of capability, like it's getting democratized to the point that I'm really excited about it helping nonprofits, NGOs, small businesses. So I think that's going to be a great boon for society at large. I do a lot of work particularly I've been focusing around health and climate lately, and there's a lot of opportunity there, not a lot of awareness yet of how it can help, except for the big pharmas and things like that. But there's so many, I think, avenues where for those that have a social drive for something, mission, nonprofit they're working on, a board they're on, et cetera, just think about how you can incorporate these tools there, because we tend to think about it for either our personal lives or our business lives, but often it doesn't translate into our mission work. So I think that's something that I'm really encouraging folks to do.
Solving other problems.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll try not to make this fall up too long. DeepSeek. So by the time listeners are hearing this, you're going to be hearing it like mid-March. So probably more stuff has happened, but
it'd be like DeepSeek 5 by then. Yeah.
This came out recently. The interesting thing, regardless of where we end up with how much it really cost and how they built the models and all that, is the work to say, oh, I could run this on really low-end hardware at home or in my office or whatever, and even reasonable, we're not talking tens of thousands of dollars, right? Fast hardware, depending on how big of the model you want, right? So anywhere from a Raspberry Pi up to a server level hardware, but really inexpensive compared to how we've been thinking about this. That, if nothing else, that gets people thinking differently about controlling the use of AI in an organization, and consequently controlling where the data goes. Because now we don't have to take Gemini's or OpenAI's word for they put a wall around our data for our organization. We know it's where it actually is. That changes things, I think, going forward a bit, especially around this data privacy topic. Thoughts on that? Is this going to be a thing or not, or what do you think?
No, I think it will be. On the enterprise side, I think you're absolutely right. One of the very soon, if not already, organizations that are regulated or security conscious can start to pull some of this capability sort of within their at least virtual data center, not actual data center, but just start to bring more of that in and have both more control and confidence that it's truly private. So I think that's a good thing for enterprises. I do think sort of if you play this out another couple of years, we're going to see more innovation, more shrinking of models, but also more advanced models. So you'll sort of see, I think the data center and the big tech companies that are driving all the investment, the NVIDIAs of the world, they'll still exist. I think their stocks will do just fine.
Right.
But they're going to be continuing to push the bleeding edge. And then a few generations back will be the commoditized, almost edge kind of capability. So if we think about Internet of Things, the IoT, this is going to be the AIoT. There's going to be all of our smart devices truly become smart devices if you can embed. Imagine having a large language model in your fridge, in your Alexa, which is still not, clearly. So I think there's a lot of that kind of opportunity, but you're right, then what does that mean for data privacy? And if the last 15 years are any indication, I think it means, sadly, back to that point, I'm usually an optimist, but sadly, I think it means less privacy for us, more of our data becoming accessible to companies, third parties, because it's even more valuable now than it was 10 years ago. For instance, your spoken voice, your conversations, you're talking about trips coming up, and all of a sudden Facebook's advertising to go to that place.
Right.
It's not a great place to live in if you are a security and privacy minded person. It's definitely eroded over the last 20 years.
Yeah, it will definitely be a key topic for individuals and enterprises. How's all the information I give it being used, right? So, yep. Okay, very good. So we do like quotes around here, right? Our innovation quotes, and I wanted to ask you for one too. Before I get to that, we're talking about just evolving technologies and how product managers can be thinking about these things. We hit on the workflow topic a lot. For product managers themselves to improve in their profession, their trade, as creating new products that customers love and making products better, there's some known knowledge frameworks to help with that. The one that I learned came from PDMA, and they've been in this area for 50 years now as a professional association doing research, really building out new knowledge for product managers and innovators, and also curating what is available. And they package that into 7 areas of this framework. And I found it so very helpful. I started teaching others this framework as well. And people have found it to help them. The way I position it, if you're brand new to product management, you need some experience under your belt before you're going to really find this helping you. So if you have 3 years or more of experience, it works well. And I created a system to just make it easy to learn these 7 knowledge areas. I call it the RPM experience, the Rapid Product Mastery Experience. It's a self-paced training program. You can take it yourself and really aid your career. It's going to help you get ready for that next step of responsibility. If you're a product VP and you want to, in a way, improve the performance of your product managers, I do a facilitated experience for organizations, and it works really well. So a great way, if you're committed to this career track and want to be a professional product person, check that out. Simply go to productmasterynow.com/RPM, and you will find information on that. And somehow we all learn our stuff. I know, Matt, you have certainly done a lot of trial and error learning on the job as well, just like me. I like it when we have programs that come along that can help us. And this is what that's meant to be. Innovation quote. What did you pick for us, and what does it mean?
Yeah, so I have 2 of them that actually basically say the same thing, but one of them is maybe a little more professional than the other. So the first is Alan Kay, computer science. Best way to predict the future is to create it. But because I also am a Disney nut, said the same thing basically is the way to get started is to quit talking and start doing and begin doing. So yeah, I think it's, for me, it's a reminder, because I can get stuck in my head a lot, that particularly if you're building something, if you're an innovator, you're a change agent, you're an entrepreneur within an organization, yes, there is a time for thinking and strategy for sure, but if in doubt, start doing, start moving.
That's it. Yep. Start moving. That's how we figure things out and learn things. So like that. Wonderful. And for people, because I think we did an okay job being helpful and hit some topics are relevant. So I'm planning on publishing this. For people that want to find out about the work you're doing, and you also do coaching and consulting work in this space as well, how can people reach out to you, find out more?
Yeah, so I am very active on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to me, just Matt Coatney. And then also I have a venture company that I started not long ago called 10 Billion Ventures. So number 10, then billionventures.com. And that's my sort of my passion, mission-based organization.
Tell us briefly what that thing is about then.
Yeah. So I've done so much technology and startup advising over the course of the last 10 years or so, and I've started to gravitate more of that toward health and climate, which are really sort of areas that I'm passionate about. And I thought, instead of having all these disjointed efforts, let's bring in under one banner, and then really focus on, it's two things. It's one, it's helping startups both in early stage product development and growth, but then also increasingly more venture. So giving of time and investment to try to get these companies to the next level.
Very good. Okay, and we'll make sure that the link to your LinkedIn profile is in the show notes. That sounds like the easiest way to reach out. And also the information on, was it billion or million? 10?
Billion.
That's what I thought you
10 billion ventures, which is by 2050 something, there will be 10 billion humans on the planet. So this is how do we sustainably do that?
Yep. Okay. I like it. Good. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate the information. Listeners, if you want to find out, or at least find those links and find the written version of everything we discussed, you can do that by going to productmasterynow.com/531. As always, keep innovating.
Thank you for listening to Product Mastery Now, where product leaders and managers gain product mastery through practical knowledge, influence, and confidence. By listening, you are becoming a product master, creating products customers love. Find additional resources at productmasterynow.com. Keep innovating.